Okay, listen up. This is the chilling moment cops slap cuffs on a woman suspected of pulling off the ultimate betrayal. I'm placing you under arrest for suspicion of fraud, false representation. Okay, so false representation of. So, the circumstances are you're using your husband's card without permission to make purchases. Okay. So, you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. She stands in the garden on a warm summer evening, watching as the gardener rakes fresh grass cuttings into neat piles beneath the bushes. Her voice is calm, almost pleasant as she asks him to leave the clippings right there under the greenery at the bottom of the garden. He nods, wipes his brow, and does as she asks. It seems like such an ordinary request on such an ordinary day. But beneath those grass cuttings, wrapped in black bin bags and stuffed inside a canvas holdall, lies the body of her husband, a man she once promised to love and cherish, a man she has now silenced forever. This is the story of Maureen Rickards, a 50-year-old woman from Canterbury, Kent, who murdered her husband, Jeremy, and then tried to make the world believe he had simply disappeared abroad. What you are about to hear is not just a story of murder. It is a story of manipulation. And the question we must all ask ourselves is this: how many warning signs were missed before it was too late? Maureen Rickards was born in April 1974. And for much of her life, she appeared to be an ordinary woman navigating the complexities of modern Britain. She lived in Canterbury, a historic cathedral city in Kent, a place known for its cobbled streets, medieval architecture, and quiet, respectable neighborhoods. To those who passed her on the street or exchanged pleasantries in local shops, there was nothing particularly remarkable about her. She was middle-aged, living in a shared house on St. Martin's Road, and she had been married to Jeremy Rickards for 27 years. On the surface, it seemed like a long, stable partnership, the kind that weathers storms and endures. But surfaces can be deceiving. And behind the closed doors of that Canterbury home, Maureen was not the partner she appeared to be. She was, according to prosecutors and those who later pieced together the evidence, a woman capable of sustained cruelty. A woman who controlled her husband through fear and violence, and a woman who, when that control was threatened or when her anger boiled over, was willing to kill. What drives someone to become an abuser? Psychologists tell us that domestic violence is rarely about a single moment of rage. It is about power, about the need to dominate and control another person. It often begins subtly, a sharp word here, a dismissive comment there, and then escalates over time. The abuser learns that aggression works, that it silences dissent and keeps their victim compliant. And in some cases, the abuser may even record their own acts of violence, not out of remorse, but as a twisted form of validation or control. Maureen Rickards did exactly that. Maureen Rickards was 50 years old when she killed her husband. She had spent nearly 3 decades married to him. And yet, instead of growing closer over those years, instead of building a life based on mutual respect and care, she had created a prison for Jeremy, a place where he was constantly afraid, constantly hurt, and ultimately fatally trapped. What was going on inside her mind during those years? What made her believe that violence was acceptable, that her husband's suffering was justified? These are questions that may never be fully answered. Maureen herself has offered no explanation, no expression of remorse, no insight into her motivations. She has remained silent, leaving others to try to make sense of the senseless. Maureen Rickards is not a name that will be remembered with sympathy. She is not a victim of circumstance, or a tragic figure driven to desperation. Jeremy Rickards was 65 years old when he died. A man who had lived a full and varied life, who had worked hard, who had loved his family, and who in the final months of his life had become a shadow of the person he once was. He was a geologist by profession, someone who understood the layers of the earth, the slow processes that shaped landscapes over millennia. But he could not have predicted the slow erosion of his own safety, the gradual collapse of his world under the weight of his wife's violence. Jeremy was not a large man, not someone who looked physically imposing. In the photographs that have been shared publicly, he appears gentle, perhaps a little weary, with the kind of face that suggests kindness and patience. He had a daughter, Gemma, from a previous relationship, and he maintained contact with her even as his life with Maureen became increasingly difficult. Gemma would later play a crucial role in uncovering what had happened to her father. But in the months leading up to his death, she was kept at a distance, fed lies and half-truths by Maureen, who controlled the flow of information with practiced ease. Those who knew Jeremy in the community remember him as a quiet man, someone who kept to himself, but who was always polite, always willing to exchange a few words if you stopped to chat. He was a regular at a local Wetherspoons pub in Canterbury, a place where he could sit with a drink and perhaps find a brief respite from the tension at home. It was in that pub in mid-May 2024 that a member of staff noticed something troubling. Jeremy had visible bruising on his face, dark marks around his eyes and ears, and a large cut on his forehead. When asked what had happened, Jeremy offered a simple, unconvincing explanation. He had been in a car accident. The staff member accepted the answer, perhaps because it seemed easier than pressing further. Perhaps because Jeremy himself seemed reluctant to say more. But there had been no car accident. The injuries were the result of violence at home, violence inflicted by the woman he had been married to for 27 years. In the weeks that followed, Jeremy's condition worsened. Housemates in the shared property where he and Maureen lived began to notice more and more signs of abuse. They saw him with fresh bruises, heard the sounds of shouting and hitting coming from the couple's room, and witnessed Jeremy looking increasingly frail and frightened. One housemate would later tell police that Jeremy had confided in him, saying that he was scared of Maureen, that she was angry with him. Another recalled seeing Jeremy so badly beaten that he looked as though he had been in a brutal fight. These were not minor injuries. They were the kind of injuries that should have prompted urgent intervention, that should have raised alarm bells. But Jeremy, like so many victims of domestic abuse, did not reach out for help. Perhaps he was ashamed. Perhaps he believed that no one would take him seriously. Perhaps he simply did not know where to turn. Jeremy Rickards was a man who deserved to live out his later years in peace, surrounded by people who cared for him, free from fear and pain. Instead, he spent his final months trapped in a relationship that was slowly destroying him, unable or unwilling to escape, and ultimately unable to survive. The last confirmed sighting of Jeremy Rickards alive was on the 7th of June, 2024. On that day, he topped up his mobile phone, a small, routine action that would later become a crucial piece of evidence in establishing the timeline of his death. After that, Jeremy vanished from the world. His phone went silent. His bank card was no longer used by him. And the man who had been a regular presence in his local community, who had been seen bruised and battered just weeks before, was suddenly gone. But Jeremy had not left Canterbury. He had not taken his own life in some distant country. He was still in the house on St. Martin's Road, or rather, his body was. And the person responsible for his death was the woman he had lived with for nearly 3 decades. The woman who had promised to stand by him, the woman who had instead become his killer. The exact moment of Jeremy's death is not known with absolute certainty, but investigators believe it occurred sometime between the 8th of June and the 26th of June, 2024. What is known, from the evidence gathered by police and forensic experts, is that Jeremy was stabbed 5 times in the chest. 2 of those stab wounds pierced his heart, injuries that would have been rapidly fatal. The weapon used has never been found, despite extensive searches of the property and surrounding area. Maureen Rickards has never revealed what she did with the knife or blade she used, and she has never explained why she chose that particular method of killing her husband. Stabbing is an intensely personal form of violence. It requires close proximity, physical effort, and a willingness to inflict pain directly. It is not a distant, detached act like poisoning or shooting from afar. It is intimate, brutal, and deliberate. And in this case, it was not a single impulsive strike. It was 5 separate wounds, each one a conscious decision to continue the attack, to ensure that Jeremy would not survive. After Jeremy was killed, Maureen faced a problem: what to do with his body. She could not simply leave it where it was, not if she wanted to avoid immediate discovery. And so she set about hiding the evidence of her crime with a methodical, chilling efficiency. First, she moved Jeremy's body into a cupboard in her bedroom. This was not a large cupboard, and fitting a grown man's body inside would have required effort and planning. Pools of blood were later found inside the cupboard and on the floor beneath it. Blood that had seeped through the carpet and left stains on the ceiling of the flat below. The presence of blood in these locations confirmed that Jeremy's body had lain in that cupboard for some time, slowly decomposing in the warm summer air. Forensic entomologists, scientists who study insects and their life cycles, were brought in to help determine when Jeremy had died. Insects, particularly flies, are among the first to arrive at a body after death, and the stage of development of their larvae can provide valuable clues about the time since death. In this case, the entomologists examined the insects found on and around Jeremy's body, and concluded that he had been dead for several weeks by the time he was discovered. This evidence helped narrow down the window of time during which the murder had occurred, and it also confirmed that the body had been moved at least once, from the bedroom cupboard to the garden. At some point, after storing Jeremy's body in the cupboard, Maureen decided to move it again. She wrapped the body in black bin bags, the kind you might use for household rubbish, and placed it inside a large canvas holdall. Then, under cover of darkness, she carried or dragged the holdall down the stairs and out into the garden. One of the housemates later recalled hearing something heavy being moved at night, a sound that seemed odd at the time, but which took on a sinister significance once the truth was known. Maureen placed the holdall at the bottom of the garden, beneath some bushes. And then she waited. On the 26th of June, Maureen hired a gardener to come and cut the grass. When he had finished, she asked him to leave the grass cuttings under the bushes at the bottom of the garden. The gardener, unsuspecting, did as he was asked. The fresh grass cuttings provided an additional layer of concealment, covering the holdall and helping to mask the smell of decomposition that was beginning to emanate from the garden. It was a calculated move, one that showed Maureen's awareness of the need to hide the evidence and her willingness to manipulate others to achieve that goal. But even as she worked to conceal her husband's body, Maureen was also busy constructing a false narrative to explain his absence. On the 27th of June, she used Jeremy's mobile phone to send a text message to herself and to Jeremy's daughter, Gemma. The message claimed that Jeremy had gone to Saudi Arabia for work. It was a lie, of course, but it was a lie that bought Maureen time. If people believed that Jeremy was abroad, they would not come looking for him. They would not ask difficult questions. And Maureen could continue to live in the house, using Jeremy's bank card, going about her daily life as though nothing had happened. The following day, the 28th of June, Maureen sent another message from Jeremy's phone, this time claiming that he had taken his own life in Saudi Arabia. The message was brief and shocking, designed to forestall further questions, but it had the opposite effect. Gemma, Jeremy's daughter, did not believe the message. She knew her father, and she knew that something was very wrong. She contacted the police and reported him missing, setting in motion the investigation that would ultimately uncover the truth. Between the 20th of June and the 30th of June, Maureen used Jeremy's bank card to make several purchases in Canterbury. CCTV footage from local shops captured her buying cleaning products, bleach, detergent, the kinds of things you might use to scrub away bloodstains. Back at the house, she attempted to clean the carpet in her bedroom, trying to remove the evidence of what had happened there. But blood is difficult to erase completely, and forensic analysis later revealed traces of Jeremy's blood on the carpet, despite Maureen's efforts to clean it. On the 11th of July 2024, police officers arrived at the house on St. Martin's Road. They were there initially to arrest Maureen on suspicion of fraud, having discovered that she had been using Jeremy's bank card after he was reported missing. But as they entered the property, they noticed something else, a smell. It was a strong, unpleasant odor, the kind of smell that makes you instinctively recoil. The officers recognized it immediately. It was the smell of decomposition, the smell of death. They searched the house and then moved to the garden. At the bottom of the garden, beneath the bushes and the grass cuttings, they found the holdall. Inside, wrapped in black bin bags, was the body of Jeremy Rickards. He had been dead for weeks, and the summer heat had accelerated the process of decomposition. The discovery was both a confirmation of the officers' worst fears and the beginning of a homicide investigation that would reveal the full extent of Maureen's cruelty. When Maureen was arrested on suspicion of murder, she feigned shock. "What body?" she asked, as though she had no idea what the police were talking about. When told she was being held on suspicion of murder, she repeated the word incredulously. "Murder? Murder." It was a performance, an attempt to appear innocent, but it was not convincing. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her act of surprise could not change the facts. The post-mortem examination revealed not only the 5 stab wounds that had killed Jeremy, but also the other injuries he had sustained in the weeks and months before his death: the strangulation marks on his neck, the fractured ribs, the bruises and cuts. All of these told a story of sustained abuse, of a man who had been hurt repeatedly and who had finally been killed by the person who was supposed to love him. Forensic analysis of Maureen's mobile phone uncovered the videos she had recorded, videos in which she berated Jeremy, struck him, and threatened to kill him. These videos were not accidental. They were deliberate recordings, evidence of Maureen's control over her husband and her willingness to document her own violence. In one video, she could be heard saying that she would do him harm, that she would kill him. It was a chilling preview of what was to come, a threat that she would ultimately carry out. The investigation also revealed that Maureen had tried to blame others for Jeremy's injuries. She had told people that he had been in a car accident, that his bruises and cuts were the result of a mishap, not abuse. She had lied to friends, to housemates, to anyone who asked. And even after his death, she continued to lie, sending fake messages from his phone, using his bank card, and acting as though he was still alive and simply away on business. But lies, no matter how carefully constructed, cannot stand forever. And in this case, the truth was uncovered by a combination of diligent police work, forensic science, and the determination of Jeremy's daughter to find out what had really happened to her father. The evidence was clear, the timeline was established, and the person responsible was identified. Maureen Rickards had killed her husband, hidden his body, and tried to cover up her crime. And now she would have to face the consequences. What detectives uncovered in that Canterbury garden was not just a body, but a story of cruelty, control, and ultimately murder. It was a story that shocked the local community, and that raised difficult questions about how such violence could have gone unnoticed for so long. And it was a story that would end not with Maureen's lies being believed, but with her being held accountable for what she had done. Maureen Rickards was charged with the murder of her husband, Jeremy Rickards, and her case was brought before Canterbury Crown Court. The trial took place over 2 weeks in March 2025, and it was a trial that laid bare the full extent of Maureen's cruelty and the suffering that Jeremy had endured in the final months of his life. The prosecution, led by senior Crown prosecutors from the Crown Prosecution Service Southeast, presented a compelling case built on forensic evidence, witness testimony, and the videos that Maureen herself had recorded. Throughout the trial, Maureen maintained her innocence. She claimed that she was being set up, that something scary and spooky was happening, that she was the victim of some kind of conspiracy. But her claims were not supported by the evidence. The forensic analysis, the timeline, the witness statements, all of it pointed to one conclusion: that Maureen Rickards had killed her husband and then tried to cover up her crime. On the 13th of March, 2025, after hearing all the evidence and deliberating on the case, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Maureen Rickards was convicted of murder. She did not react visibly when the verdict was read out in court, maintaining the same detached demeanor she had shown throughout the trial. But the verdict was clear, and it was final. She had been found guilty of taking her husband's life, and now she would be sentenced. Sentencing took place on the 9th of April, 2025 at the same court. Mr. Justice Kerr, the judge presiding over the case, addressed Maureen directly, even though she had chosen not to appear in person for the sentencing hearing. In his remarks, the judge acknowledged that he could not fully understand what had motivated Maureen's actions. "I accept you loved him," he said, referring to Jeremy. "I don't know why you killed him. You have to live with the loss of him. You have shown no remorse." The judge went on to describe how Maureen had desecrated her husband's body by hiding it in the garden, treating it not with the respect and dignity that a human being deserves, but as something to be concealed and disposed of. "I am sure you intended his death and nothing less," the judge said. "After the killing, you desecrated your husband's corpse." Maureen Rickards was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 22 years before she would be eligible to apply for parole. This means that she will be at least 72 years old before she can even be considered for release. And there is no guarantee that parole will be granted. A life sentence in the UK is exactly that. A sentence that reflects the gravity of the crime and ensures that justice is served. Man, digging into this case really hits hard. It's like peeling back layers of a nightmare you didn't see coming, where everyday life hides something so dark and twisted. What started as whispers of worry from a daughter turned into this massive unraveling of lies, abuse, and cold calculation that shocked everyone involved. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest stories aren't made up. They're right there in quiet neighborhoods, building up until they explode into the light. The way the pieces fell together, from those fake texts to the hidden body and those haunting phone videos, it's all so raw and real, making you question how much we miss in the people around us. But in the end, truth won out, thanks to sharp investigators and one family's refusal to let go, turning tragedy into a call for awareness that sticks with you long after.